Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. This beginning part is usually reserved for, housekeeping, oh, what's up with me? What's going on? There really isn't much to say at this point, especially considering I've been basically setting, I've recorded recently, just now, I finished recording, segments for what's going to be part of the next video, so I'm trying to get to the point where I can officially, finish the podcast so I can sleep at one point. I guess I do like the fact that this episode is going to be slightly more productive than the last one, so let's just skip over that and let's get right into the news. First, a news story that I don't know if I covered at this point, but maybe I did. I think I briefly covered something related to this very briefly, but I didn't go into the full extent of it, and I didn't really figure out how deep it went until recently. But El Salvador extended state of emergency as family protests arbitrary arrests. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele has extended a nationwide state of emergency, citing risks of criminal gangs. It's the third time Bukele has extended emergency rules since March, when he granted authorities sweeping powers to arrest and try people without due process. Tens of thousands of people have since been arrested. Amnesty International says the crackdown has led to massive human rights violations, including thousands of arbitrary detentions and violations of due process, as well as torture, ill treatment, and the deaths of at least 18 people in state custody. So yeah, for those who don't remember, Nayib Bukele, the basically dictator of El Salvador, his country's been in a state of emergency ever since March, at least March at this point, and he has extended his state of emergency so that he can keep arresting people. And it's uh-oh, this is very screwed up. And the worst part is, this is incredibly popular. This state of emergency is incredibly popular because people are buying into the idea he's taking down criminal gangs, even though a lot of people, I've covered a story where a woman who had no relation to a gang was just randomly arrested out of nowhere. And it's that's basically what's going on in El Salvador, but people are so brainwashed that they're just willing to accept this. His country is down in such a big, dire situation that they're willing to just throw away their civil rights because they're afraid of gang violence. This is how authoritarianism rises. He needs a scapegoat, and this is what the scapegoat is. There's not much more I can say, except this is screwed up, and the fact that there are some people who actually are simping for this is ludicrous. So anyway, speaking of states of emergency, here's another emergency that's been recently revealed. The WHO declares monkeypox a public health emergency of international concern. The World Health Organization has declared the monkeypox outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. The decision was announced Saturday morning after WHO convened its second emergency committee on the issue Thursday. Just when COVID was letting up. Just when COVID seemed to start becoming a lot more manageable. Ta-da! I was just getting to the point where I was officially okay, maybe I don't have to wear masks everywhere I go anymore. Basically, my theory in regards to masks at that point was basically I live in this area, and this is an incredibly blue area, so I figure that at least a majority of people in this area have been taking COVID rather seriously, so maybe I don't have to wear a mask that much. But today, I did go to an extremely red area, and I did feel a little bit under the weather, so of course I put on a mask. And this isn't a flimsy mask either, this is a thick mask. And of course you also do other precautions, wash your hands, that kind of stuff. And keeping my doses up to date. I have to wait till September 5th to get my next dose, at least unless the government decides that it's officially not free no more. That's basically my viewpoint in regards to the COVID vaccine. As long as it's free, I'll keep getting up-to-date vaccinations. When I start getting to pay out of my own pocket, then it's maybe I'll just stay home a lot more. You're seeing it now. A lot of public officials are not wearing masks that often anymore, even the left-wing ones. But hopefully, with all the things that have happened up to this point with the COVID pandemic, maybe we'll be better prepared for the monkeypox one. Except I don't know if that would be the case, because I don't necessarily know if Biden would do that, because he's supposed to be the one that's supposed to be like, we got out of the pandemic thanks to Joe Biden. But then it's like, well, do we have to go back in? We'll just have to wait and see how things play out. And next story, something quite interesting happened. 17 lawmakers were arrested outside of the Supreme Court amid abortion rights protests. A total of 35 people were arrested by U.S. Capitol Police at the protest, including Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Alma Adams. Other people that were there were Andy Levin, Barbara Lee, and quite a number of other people. Okay, here's a full list of, well, not a full list, but I think it's a decent list. Alma Adams, Cori Bush, Catherine Clark, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Madeleine Dean, Veronica Escobar, Sarah Jacobs, Andy Levin, Carolyn Maloney, Barbara Lee, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Jan Schakowsky, Jackie Spear, Rashida Tlaib, and Nidia Vasquez. Now, one thing that is very interesting you should note is that a lot of these representatives are women, and the only one who's not a woman is Andy Levin, who is in a very close primary race. And his primary opponent, Haley Stevens, another incumbent Democrat, wasn't here. So I don't know if this was done intentionally. I think that perhaps this might have been done intentionally. Either they invited Haley and she didn't show up, so they invited Levin instead, or they intentionally invited Levin and not Stevens in order to bolster his bid for, Congress. Because he did get a bolster of support for his congressional bid due to this. But interestingly enough, the thing that got the most attention was not anything that you'd expect. You see, as it turns out, apparently, for some reason, I say for some reason, but it's pretty obvious what the reason is, this ended up becoming an AOC thing again. This ended up becoming the thing for the anti-AOC stands to basically just bolster this huge anti-AOC BS narrative. Again, it's always this. So here's what happened. AOC was, she was arrested, obviously, but at one point when she was arrested, she raised her fist in solidarity for the people, but that made some people confused because she had her hands behind her back, so they're like, wait, did AOC fake being in handcuffs? AOC faked being in handcuffs. Basically that's what happened. They made up a claim that AOC faked being in handcuffs or faked her entire arrest. Faked the protest. I don't know. It's weird. It's they faked being cuffed, even though AOC never claimed to be handcuffed. And it's quite obvious that that wasn't the case, considering she raised her arm in solidarity with the protesters, thus showing she was not cuffed. But apparently, the anti-AOC crowd made up that she claimed to be cuffed, and then got mad at her for claiming to be cuffed, even though she never made the claim. She point-blank stated that the reason why she put her hands behind her back is because that's what you're supposed to do when you're getting arrested. And she did that to try and de-escalate, not further escalate any sort of conflict. And again, people made up that she faked being cuffed. One of the most prominent people that I know was the Alt Left podcast, who basically literally made up total fan fiction about the situation, and then were mad that I didn't get their brain dead interpretation of of what happened. Look, here's the literal obvious thing that happened. As a public official, they did not cuff her or treat her in any bad way because she is a public official, quite very obviously. That would be bad PR for doing that to one of the most prominent members of Congress, beating her or handcuffing her or putting her to the ground. Doing that would be incredibly bad PR, and obviously they didn't see her as a threat, so they didn't handcuff her. Very obvious situation, very obvious thing to put together, but for some reason, they really seem to think that for some reason that AOC was faking being handcuffed. And despite me repeatedly saying, like, this is basically the whole conversation. It's like, they keep saying the handcuff bit, the handcuff bit, the handcuff bit. I'm like, what handcuff bit? You're making up a handcuff bit. That is why I cannot understand your belief. You're making up something and then going on about it. And despite the fact that this is a thing I had to say over and over again. Like, you're making up the handcuff bit. And I'm asking them, like, what do you mean the handcuff bit? And it's just so dumb. They literally said, this is an actual thing. It's like, my third attempt at being like, you're making up the handcuff bit. They say, I never claimed that she claimed to be handcuffed. But that was clearly her intention. I'm arguing that she meant for people to think that. And it's like, so what, you're a mind reader now? Like, what? You can somehow read into AOC's head and figure out that she was trying to make people think that she was trying to be, like, they literally just made up, like, complete and utter fan fiction. It was literally like watching a Jimmy Dore segment. AOC was secretly trying to get people, like, no, literally, this is what it is. Yeah, lifting her arms up happened afterwards, once she got her photo op. I'm saying she slipped up, and raising her arm flies right in the face of the reason she gave for having her arms behind her back. That's my issue with this. It's like, what do you mean? She was on camera, raising her hand. Clearly, like, they're making up this idea that she was trying to get a photo op, that she was trying to get all this, like, they made up her pretending to have the handcuffs in the first place and trying to get a photo op, and then get, like, it's just so dumb, the fact that anybody considered that the big takeaway. Those guys are apparently decided to have a friggin' debate on it. Why? That is the thing that you choose to talk about? They have this problem, like, very much. They'll say something and expect you to already know what they're talking about. They will say things, but never actually explain the things. Like, there were many times where they were just saying things, and then when I would ask them for clarification, they say, we already explained it. And it's like, no, you didn't. And they go, well, we're doing this in a million different things. Then don't get into a million different arguments. You don't want to explain it 15,000 times. Don't get into 15,000 different arguments at the same time. Maybe don't force 3 co-hosts to use one Twitter account. Anyways, I'm just going to cut off the topic right there because, I mean, I'll just get into random bits of internet drama because of it. Anyways, now let's move on to the same-sex marriage bill. Because as you all know, Democrats have finally learned something. Wait, we can't just rely on a Supreme Court hearing to, like, have our prime issues taken away? We have to actually do something about them? What? They figured that out. So now they're actually trying to push for a bill to codify same-sex marriage into law. And the House passed it, and quite a number of Republicans actually voted for it. And it was quite interesting. And now it goes to the Senate, where many people are wondering, is it dead? To which people actually are surprisingly figuring out, wait, maybe it's not. The first thing I find interesting is that they're basing it on the assumption that all the members of the Democratic caucus will vote with this bill, and I don't know if this is wishful thinking or not. I don't remember if Joe Manchin was 100% on board with gay marriage. Maybe he's more on board with that than abortion. I don't know. But we're just going to go with the wishful thinking and hopefully thinking that Joe Manchin will vote in favor of this. So many people are wondering that, like, will the Democrats be able to reach 10 GOP senators to join and codify this into law? Like, technically, it could pass with a slim majority, but it's like, if they get 60, then they won't need a slim majority. And the thing is, the Republican Party is kind of divided on this. You see, of course, we all know that the Republican Party has historically been opposed to gay marriage, but also, there's a small faction of the GOP that wants the gay marriage issue to be over, because that was the big wedge issue that officially that basically just drew a hard line between the GOP and everybody else. Basically, every other group historically has been pro gay marriage, even if it's like reluctantly. They like fully are like, we, and like 2016 was the first one where the wedge issue was gone, and that was partially what led to Trump winning, because there were some Democrats that were like, okay, so Trump can't do anything like extremely anti-gay for like the evangelicals because the issue was over. Everybody thought people thought Obergefell was it. Now people are a little bit more worried because some Republicans have kind of shifted back into the culture war type things, and there are some Republicans that are in that field that are also in the crowd of like, we want the issue to be over. But a lot more of the people who are on this issue should be over are the people that just want to make gay marriage a right and move on. Of the 50 members of the Republican Senate caucus, 13 have already issued how they would vote on this bill. 8 Republican senators have indicated they would vote no. However, 5 have indicated that they would support it. Those senators in question are Suzanne Collins and Lisa Murkowski, basically no-brainers, Rob Portman of Ohio, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Now, here are a couple of things that make each of these ones interesting. Like, I mean, for starters, Suzanne Collins and Lisa Murkowski, it's pretty obvious. Those ones are usually the ones that are like, they're the Republicans that are usually with the Democrats on social issues. The other 3 might come off as more surprising. Like, I mean, to be honest, I don't really know what the heck is up with Tillis. Maybe Tillis was just the more moderate. Like, I mean, to be fair, Tillis was just the more moderate of the 2 Republican North Carolina senators. Burr is definitely like the hardline anti-LGBTQ guy. Rob Portman is interesting because of 2 things. One, his son is gay, and quite interesting. That's a quite interesting fact that I didn't know. But also, Rob Portman is not going to be in the Senate come November. Rob Portman is retiring, so of course he would vote right on a bill that he won't be able to face any political repercussions of. But also, what's interesting is Ron Johnson is actually doing quite the opposite. He's running for re-election. And many people are wondering, since his seat's a swing seat, maybe he's trying to court Democratic voters. But the thing is, if I remember correctly, I read that article and it said that Portman stated that he believes that that at least 10 Republicans will vote with the Democrats on this bill. And there's like worry, like even if Republicans personally do think that the issue is over and they'll just vote for it and move on, it's kind of hard to give Democrats a W. I think it's sort of the same thing with the impeachment vote. Many Republicans stated that, I think Romney point blank stated that if the impeachment vote was a secret, then a lot more Republicans would have voted for Trump to be impeached. But since they don't live in that world anymore, and the votes will be public knowledge, they will have to face the political repercussions, and that's of course probably going to hurt, since there's still a very prominent evangelical base. So anyways, last story is something quite interesting, and it kind of has a slight tie to the main topic. Remember how Texas had a House seat that flipped, and the current one is Mayra Flores? Well, there's a controversy surrounding this race, as the Democratic person who is favored to win in the general election, because she won the special election, he's going to be winning the regular election, Vicente Gonzalez, well, apparently he made a very bad mistake with this race. You see, he paid a couple of bloggers in the state to basically basically just go and talk crap about her. But it turns out that one of the people that has been talking crap about her is a blogger who has been saying very racist stuff about her. One of the most prominent things is calling her Miss Frijoles, but another thing is that the blogger commonly refers to her as like Mexican food or like Latino food, and it's like, yikes. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because this is quite probably one of the seats this is a common problem with Democrats. They'll do something, it seems to be a very easy seat, and then the Democrats will do something to just screw it all up. So anyways, with that out of the way, I guess we should move on to the main topic of the video. A midterm update. As the year is halfway done, so too are the midterms, and basically we're in the final stretch, at least for primaries, and as such we're going to be starting to focus a lot more on how the general election pans out. So I'm basically going to go over what I think is happening right now. For this one, we're mostly going to be focusing on the Senate races, because those are the ones that are a lot more focusable, but we'll be going over a lot of aspects. First, I guess we should talk about some myths to this channel. The progressive deluge, the thing that I basically tried to make my blue wave, well, to be frank, not really a thing anymore. In fact, it was rarely a thing at all. We still have some people left that are in winnable primaries. You know, Andy Levin is still in his heavily contested primary, and we potentially have like Cory Bush and Rashida Tlaib who might have some problems going into their primaries. But we also have some newcomers like David Segal, Mandela Burns, Lucas Coons, Maxwell Frost, Becca Balin, Alan Ellison. We have some long shot primaries still out there like William Sanchez, Jason Cull, Brittany Ramos de Barrios, Melanie Durango, and Alessandra Biaggi. And there's still a couple of blue open seats left that we could potentially see some progressives in. Hawaii District 2, New York 4, Michigan 13. But basically we're at the point where the progressive deluge is kind of faded. And I think this latest races have kind of ruined it, because Donna Edwards sadly didn't make it through her race. Quite the sadness. Neither too did Jerome Segal. In fact, I don't even know if I'm going to be endorsing any more people, at least until after the primaries are done. Like, I think after I think basically what's on the site now is probably going to be what's remaining. Like, I mean, I don't think I'll be endorsing anybody else. I mean, I don't know. I don't think there are many other progressives out there. If there were, I probably would have seen them already. If they make it through the general, then maybe I'll endorse them. But like, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to figure it out. Okay, so first, how are the governor's races doing? To be honest, I don't really care. Basically, here's the truth about the governor's races. Most of the ones that are there are done deals. Like, I mean, I don't really see any flippable governor seats, really. And if there are flippable governor seats, I don't really see them playing that much of a factor into how things pan out. Like, I mean, the most high-profile governor's races right now are like Georgia and Florida, and neither of those ones are even remotely flippable. The midterms are more for where we focus on the legislature. Okay, so there's the House of Representatives. Most projections say that the Democrats are going to lose the House. Okay, there's not much else I can really say about that, because that would require me going through a lot of polls, and maybe that will be the focus of the next one. But for this one, we're mostly going to be focusing on the Senate races, as those ones have a lot more to talk about, especially since the results are incredibly mixed. Like, we see this all the time on Twitter. Like, we see people going around saying, oh, the Democrats are basically going to lose basically 100% throughout the 2022 midterms. They're going to lose. The Republicans are going to have a red wave and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, if you look further into things, you'll start noticing that there are actually quite a few interesting things. Okay, so first we're going to have to talk about the Senate races in general. There are 35 Senate seats up for grabs, but as we all know, not every election is created equal, and there are some states that are very 100% obviously going to be quite obviously deep for one color. Then there are other seats that are not so deep for a color. Okay, so first, there are 9 seats that are deep blue: California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. Barring a very rare situation, those seats are going to Democrats. And there are 15 seats that are deep red: Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, the special election in Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, and Utah. Now, if you've done your math right, that leaves 11 remaining seats. Each of these 11 have been considered by mainstream pundits as potentially flippable. You don't need an extremely unlikely event to cause the state to become flippable. Like, for example, Kentucky. Literally the only thing that is going to make Kentucky flippable is maybe if Rand Paul dies right before the election and the Republicans don't have enough time to find a replacement candidate. Like, outside of that, there is literally no way that seat's flippable. There were originally 12 because Iowa was seen as potentially flippable, but then Iowa decided to instead keep Chuck Grassley around, so he's basically guaranteed the nomination. Well, I mean, he has the nomination at this point, so he's pretty much guaranteed the win. The remaining 11, as I stated, have a shot to not be represented by the same party come January. And as you've guessed, we're going to be going over all 11 of those races very briefly. Well, not very briefly, somewhat briefly. Enough that you have some information about the race, and maybe you'll want to look further into it or pay closer attention to it yourself. Now, we're going to be going by how likely I think they're going to flip. So we'll start off with the ones that I don't think have that much of a likelihood of flipping, and then we'll make our way to the ones who I think do have a very likely chance of flipping. Alright, first on the agenda is Colorado, the newest one to make it to the stage. Now, here's the thing about Colorado. Colorado is basically, it's supposed to be a purple seat. That's the whole point of Colorado. It's supposed to be like a purple area. But Colorado has steadily started shifting away from purple to become more blue. I don't know if they've become like a fully blue yet. There's still potential of like Republicans doing really well in the area. But thanks to Hickenlooper and Bennett and Polis, the state has steadily shifted blue. In fact, Bennett wasn't even considered potentially flippable until relatively recently because the Democrats were trying to do their Pied Piper strategy in this seat. They were trying to prop up an extremely far-right guy to be the nominee so that Bennett could just slide by, but instead, someone who is pretty much a moderate, nominally a moderate, he isn't like truly a moderate, but he was definitely like more moderate than this guy. It was basically like running George W. Bush against Adolf Hitler. Well, actually, that's a bit more of a that's basically a bit of an overstatement. Like, it's basically like George H.W. Bush against or Nazi. So technically, as I said, it does have potential to flip, but I think it's the safest seat of the area. I think Bennett is probably going to just slide on by. The next one is Florida. Technically, I should make it prevalent, I should make it known, that the primaries in this state have not happened, and technically, there is still a progressive-sounding Democrat in the primary, William Sanchez, but let's be real, he's not the favorite to win, and neither is Ricky De La Fuente, so we're basically going to go off the obvious assumption that it's going to be Val Demings versus Marco Rubio. And Florida is basically the opposite of Colorado. It's supposed to be a purple area, but they've steadily shifted one way on the political spectrum, and it just so happens that this one shifted red, and basically I think this race is probably going to determine whether or not the Democrats just give up on Florida. Like, I mean, DeSantis taking over was definitely a bit of a problem, and if they can't even come close, like, this has been, like, Democrats have been steadily not paying attention to Florida as much anymore because they started realizing they could start winning in other areas. They haven't quite given up yet, But I think this race is probably going to determine that they're going to probably give up Florida at this point, because there really isn't much chance that Demings has, really. Speaking of people not having chances, North Carolina is again a very high-profile seat. And after the embarrassing failure that the North Carolina Democrats took after rigging the game for the safe choice, Cal Cunningham, the North Carolina Democratic Party learned their lesson and are treating this race as a very important swing. Nope, obviously not. The lesson, the North Carolina Democratic Party literally took the worst lesson you can take from what happened in 2020. They took the idea oh, we rigged it against a black woman. That was the problem. No, the problem was that you looked at the race, assumed somebody was going to be the safe bet, and then rigged your nomination process to push everybody else out of the field to make way for them. Nobody cared that you did this to Erica Smith. It was Jeff Jackson that was the problem. You rigged it. You told Jeff Jackson he couldn't run in this seat in 2020. And then when 2022 runs around and Jeff Jackson literally is like, okay, I'll try my actual strategy that I was going to do the first time, you literally just said, no. We'll just do the same thing we did you again. Basically trying to do the same thing, consolidating support around one person so that when the general election comes, we don't have to worry about some petty squabbles. But it's no, this didn't help at all. You've made your petty squabbles worse. Because, the things that people said during the primary don't magically go away. That's one of the things that people don't realize. They don't magically disappear when the election is over. When Erica Smith called Cherry Beasley the most conservative Democrat in the field, that didn't magically go away when Erica Smith dropped out. It still was a fact of the situation. And here's the thing. This is something you're not going to hear me say often, but for some reason, it seems that the North Carolina Democratic Party made a worse choice in backing Beasley, because of all of the people who were running for the Democratic nomination, Beasley was the only one who had the honor of losing a statewide race. She is not running as a judge. She's running as a former judge because she lost. And check this out. Unlike Cal Cunningham, who prior to the election was polling well against Tillis, Cherry has been bombing against Bud notoriously. She's been bombing hard against Ted Budd. And Democrats, they're still trying to be no. I think I figured out what we can do to try and make sure that people vote for Beasley. Kick Matthew Ho off the ballot. I don't know. It's no. He was polling at best 1%. 51 to 39 doesn't make a difference with 1% of the vote. Democrats are just not taking North Carolina seriously. But hey, it could be worse. They could actively try in the state and then fail miserably. Anyways, let's move on. New Hampshire. Maggie Hassan, the incumbent senator, won by 1,017 votes in her first race. And that race was basically considered a fuck you to Trump. And as we learned with Doug Jones, those don't always last. However, the thing is, I really do think that Hassan probably has a chance of staying in the Senate. The thing about this race is that the only person who actually had a chance of beating her chose to not run in this race, Christopher Sununu, the incumbent Republican governor. You might be wondering, wait, Democratic senator, Republican governor? Yeah, these up north, blue areas usually have Republican governors. That's usually just how it is. And that's why every single time that these races are always up for grabs, they always try to get these types of governors to run. Larry Hogan, Phil Scott, they were both pushed heavily hard to run in these areas. And they literally told, this is funny, they literally told Larry Hogan in the Maryland Senate race, look, you can run And when you win, you can literally vote against everything that we push for. We don't care. We just want the number of R's to go up. And I mean, I don't like to normally use this electoral thing often, but the thing is, Republicans really, I don't necessarily know if the far right will help them win this area. And unfortunately, well, I mean, I guess fortunately because he won't win, there is a far right guy who is basically the front runner for the seat, Donald Bullock. And like, he's basically the one who's basically trying to be I'm the Trump guy, but that's the thing. Like, this area, it's not really, that is not a way to win in this area. Other areas, I don't know. Maybe it'll win in other areas. It clearly wins in other areas, but this area, I don't think it will. Now, this next Senate seat is one that it's quite interesting. This one is only up here based on a potential for it to flip, but based on certain things, it can easily just be removed. Like, for example, this seat is commonly regarded as safe R, and usually this seat was recently just removed from most top 10 Senate seats that could flip, just because of the idea of Missouri being deep red. But the thing is, this seat, I think, has potential, but it only has potential based on how the primaries happen. This seat is either incredibly flippable or completely unflippable, but it really depends on two people, Eric Greitens and Lucas Kunce. If it is those two people, or even hypothetically Kunce and literally anybody else, but particularly that one, there is potential for this seat to flip. And it's actually quite surprising. Like, for example, I'll just explain this. Eric Greitens is an extremely unpopular right-wing guy in the state. I think he was the former governor and then he resigned. He resigned over some big corruption scandal or something. But Lucas Kunce is quite an interesting guy. And I am surprised. Well, I mean, I don't think I'm necessarily surprised. Maybe I am a little bit. That he's not talked about that much. Even in certain people online, I'm surprised that he's not talked about that much. Lucas Kunce is what self-described as an anti-monopoly populist. He rejects the labels of the moderate Democrat or the progressive Democrat, which at first glance you might say, okay, that's a bit bad, but it's wait, listen. This guy is a rural populist to a T. Listen to some of his platform. End monopoly domination of our economy. Break up corporate monopolies. Monopolies are definitely one of his big things. Abolish corporate PACs and safeguard democracy. Enact a Marshall Plan for the Midwest. Abortion rights and reproductive health care. Legalizing weed and confronting the opioid epidemic. Fighting for American workers. Breaking up Big AG. Achieving universal health care, keeping our promise to veterans, equality for everyday Missourians, investing in education, defending Social Security. This guy, he's basically part of a crowd that I think that I don't know if I talked about this. I think I talked about this, but it was this small group of people that were saying okay, there's this group of people running that reject the ideas of the progressive Democrat and the moderate Democrat, and instead just run as Democrats. But basically, they were talking about a specific subsection of that were basically progressive, but weren't running on a label. And it's basically what Lucas Kunce is. Lucas Kunce is running as a progressive, but he's not running with the label. I don't know if it's a thing that he's going to change his mind on, because John Fetterman was originally considered one of these people, but as soon as he got the nomination, he basically just started running out with the P word. And Kunce, I really do believe that if Kunce is the nominee, then there is actually a chance to flip this seat, especially with someone like Greitens as the nominee. But the thing is, there's a rich woman who is running in the seat as well, and basically bought two of the candidates that were running. So there's some people who are saying that she's probably going to win, But Lucas Coons seems to be getting a lot more of like people backing him. So I really do think that there's a shot. And I'll try my best to make sure that people know about who Lucas Coons is by the time his election happens. I've been trying to get people to know about Lucas Coons, but apparently it's just not working. So anyways, the next race is the Ohio one. Basically, this seat was Midwestern Florida. It's a swing state that has shifted heavily into one direction, to the point where Democrats almost gave up on this seat. The only thing that keeps Democrats focused on the seat is the fact that Sherrod Brown is one of the senators, and many people are even suspecting that Sherrod Brown might be on his way out, just because, I don't know, how red this area has become. But many people point out the fact that Ohio, there's potential for Democrats to get power here. Dennis Kucinich was a prominent member of Ohio. Like, he's a very prevalent person, and Ohio does have a lot more of like that rural populist type energy. So technically, there is potential for people to run here and Democrats to win here. But many people are wondering, how deep is this power going to go? Does the Democrats have a shot? And many people actually just say that this race is almost a done deal for Republicans. But when you look at the projections, that's what it says. It'll say like likely R, lean R, or safe R, whatever. But then when you actually look at the polling for this seat, there is quite the different results. A majority of the polls that I've seen have Democrat Tim Ryan doing well in this seat. The aggregates put him at plus 1.8. And it seems that the polling is literally just based on historical precedent. And I mean, I'll be honest, I have seen some of the stuff that Ryan has put out. I'm not supporting him because, you know, he's anti-progressive, but he's sort of like, I guess, somewhat populist. Like, he has that, like I said, he has that sort of like populist type energy. Basically like Sherrod Brown. He's only good in the sense that the rest of the Senate is just so abhorrent that those two are basically considered okay. And I really do think that this could potentially be a sleeper race. If any, like, there's a reason why I put this race above others. This one, I think, does have a better chance of flipping. Now, next race is Wisconsin. The primary hasn't happened yet. I should make that clear. And this seat is a very consistent flipper. And the people that it flips to can be very drastically different. Gaylord Nelson, to Kasten, to Russ Feingold, to Ron Johnson. And many people are wondering, like, one of the things that makes a lot of these other areas flippable and other ones not is the advantage of incumbency, which is the fact that if you are an incumbent member of Congress or an incumbent member to any political office, you immediately have the advantage. People know who you are, and you have a lot of money. And many people are saying that Ron Johnson kind of has that. But here's the thing, Ron Johnson beat an incumbent senator, Russ Feingold, so technically, that isn't necessarily the case. And it seems that, quite obviously, that same thing is going to be levied for whoever the Democratic nominee is against him. The most likely candidate will be Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, who the K-Hive literally just found out was a progressive because Bernie Sanders endorsed him. Barnes is basically like a Wisconsin version of John Fetterman. If you know anything about Fetterman, you know that Barnes is probably safe in his process. He's a long-time progressive and, like I said, very likely to win the primary. Though, I mean, some of the primary opponents that he has, they're not exactly that bad. Like, I briefly endorsed Tom Nelson, but Tom Nelson is just like, you're not going to win, bro. I mean, I prefer progressives who can win. And, I haven't really looked into the rest of the people, but, like, I mean, I'm sure some of them are okay. So anyways, the next race is Nevada. Now, the race itself, like, I mean, I haven't looked much into the race until that point, but the race itself has been labeled a huge toss-up, the state being very even in the party voting index, and poll-wise, it's incredibly mixed. And it's especially bad as this is one of the states that chose to lean really hard into the MAGA crowd with the GOP nominee, being Adam Laxalt, who actually succeeded the incumbent senator in her job as Attorney General. Polls are really close. Aggregates put Cortez Masto in a 0.7 plus lead. So, I mean, just based on that, it's obviously a very flippable seat. If that's the seat that you're in, or whatever, then take that information what you will. In Georgia, radical liberal Raphael Warnock will be facing off against the absent father-wife beating Herschel Walker. This race is technically not as close, I don't think. The aggregates put him, like Raphael Warnock, at like a plus 2% lead. But the thing is, a lot more of the individual polls do show like constant flipping between the two top people. So maybe he probably has a shot to not win. But the thing is, I really do think that Raphael Warnock has a chance to pull it off. To be blunt, I really attribute Georgia's 2 Senate seats flipping blue and the whole state flipping blue kind of on Abrams and Warnock. And coincidentally, those two are the power team going in to the 2022 midterms. So maybe they'll be able to pull it off again. Like, I mean, I'll be really blunt. I really think that if Warnock was not on the ballot, the 2 Senate seats would not have flipped blue. But I mean, granted, of course, Abrams, rallied a bunch of people to support whoever would the Democrat nominees be. Or basically just got a lot of people to turn out to vote and got people to go into voting rolls. Like, she did a lot, obviously. And basically, I think that without those 2 things, they wouldn't be there. Like, I really do believe that if Warnock wasn't there, then a lot of the people that Abrams turned out to vote wouldn't have voted. I think because Warnock really was more of the rural, I'm trying to put it in better terms. Like, he was the more exciting candidate. Like, a lot of people were deterred by him. Like, I mean, I even went so far as to say that, like, Warnock is literally, like, the only lib that we need in the Senate right now. I mean, I have to put it at the top because, like, I mean, polling, like, you can't escape the polls. And as much as we've all been trying to say, like, of course, the polls aren't 100%, you still have to look at them very obviously with some, like, with skepticism, obviously, but with some, like, reliability. Okay, so the next one is Arizona. The primaries have not happened here, but there is some interesting things. Okay, so the incumbent senator, Mark Kelly, won in a very slim margin in his original special election. And many people are curious to see if he can pull it off again, because again, much like Doug Jones, we know that this sort of magic power can fade away, especially considering this was John McCain's seat. Maybe this was literally just an F you to Trump, and since the idea of saying F you to Trump has kind of faded away, he might have a shot at losing. And many people are curious, are mad because the 2 frontrunners for the GOP nomination are basically Trumpsters. One is Jim Lamon, who is basically like the normal Trumpster, and the other one is Blake Masters, a Nazi-endorsed Unabomber-supporting Thiel employee. But one of the things about Kelly is his biggest detriment might also be his biggest asset. You see, I keep comparing him to Doug Jones, but the thing is, Arizona is not Alabama. Like, I mean, we all knew 100% going in that Doug Jones was not going to last. His election was 100% a fluke. And yes, this seat could have been a fluke, but this seat did have more potential of changing than Alabama. Alabama was literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that will never happen again. Meanwhile, Arizona flipping is just commonplace. Like, I mean, Arizona has steadily shifted blue, so maybe Kelly's just so happened to be at the right place at the right time. But like I said, his biggest asset is the fact that he hasn't been in office for that long, but that is also his biggest detriment. You see, yes, you could say that he hasn't had enough time to get on the nerves of his constituents, but he also doesn't have enough time to get in the constituents' minds as like, oh, this is our lovely Senator, Mark Kelly. Though maybe since he was an astronaut, maybe the fact that they don't know much about him aside from that he was an astronaut is probably what they need. And lastly, we have Pennsylvania. Oh boy, this is a really good one. I've prepared a long thesis on how this Pennsylvania race is going to go, and I'm so excited to read it to you right now. All right, let me go. All right, here we go. Fetterman wins. Yeah, I mean, no offense, but this race is pretty much a done deal. I mean, I hate to be like the one that's like saying like, oh yeah, done deal. It's like, obviously it's a very contentious race. It's a toss-up, but it's very much a very likely Senate seat to flip. So anyways, let's go into predictions. Here's my final predictions. Well, not my final predictions, but like my predictions as of this point. As of now, Democrats are very likely to win in California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Oregon, Vermont, Washington, Colorado, and Pennsylvania. The ones they have a decent shot of winning are Georgia, Nevada, Wisconsin, New Hampshire. The ones they have some slim chance of winning are Missouri, Ohio, and Arizona. And the rest are Republicans. Though I have to be frank, you always have to somewhat consider the idea that maybe the Democrats will screw up. I don't think they'll screw up in Pennsylvania, because I have too much faith in Fetterman. But maybe they might lose like Nevada and New Hampshire as like they weren't paying close enough attention to those races. We don't know. Inevitably, this is all speculation at this point. We're really just going off of all historical precedent. And as we all know, historical precedent can be broken. And that's the only reason why many people are saying that Democrats are more than likely to fail. Like, yeah, because we're all basing this on historical precedent. Inevitably, we will not know until the race is done. And we still got a way to go before we get to that. So, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to notify when a future video comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go on my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check out my articles on the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.